Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. On behalf of the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, welcome to the U.S. Elections Program 2020. You're currently attending the first panel event of this program, From Demonstration to Electoral Participation, the Spectrum of Youth Action. IFES is a 501c3 organization funded in part by the U.S. government with a bipartisan board of directors and a nonpartisan organizational identity. We provide apolitical democracy and elections assistance. This work is made possible by the generous support of the American people through the United States Agency for International Development and other supporters. The content associated with this event does not necessarily reflect the views of USAID or our sponsors, nor do the opinions expressed reflect the views or opinions of IFES. My name is Andrew Rogan, and I am a program coordinator on the Europe and Eurasia team and a co-lead on the Youth and Civic Engagement Working Group at IFES. Our discussion today will be centered on American youth and their engagement in the democratic process. While young people in the US have historically been the least likely demographic to engage in the electoral process, with consistently low voter turnout rates in US elections, the tides may be turning for this year's election, as more than 3 million young people have already voted in the 2020 elections, 2 million of which are in critical states that could determine the overall outcome, such as Texas and Florida, according to the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. Indeed, political scientists have benchmarked 2020 as a year of the young, largely due to the shift in the voting bloc from baby boomers to voters 40 years old and younger, but also as a result of the increasing rates of youth registration, activism, and engagement since 2016, and more recently, the challenges posed by COVID-19 and its disproportionate impact on young people. Issues such as climate change, gun violence, racial justice, and equality have mobilized young people across the country to lead social movements and demonstrations, revealing the power of the individual and collective youth voice in the US. In this year's election, we are eager to see if this level of engagement translates into potentially record-breaking voter turnouts among young voters in the US. We are joined today by young leaders who are active in American political processes and also mobilize other young people to participate in the US. Rehana Mohammed is a young activist in the Washington, D.C. community and also one of the youngest people to run for the Advisory Neighborhood Commission in her community. Danielle Butcher works with peers from the American Conservation Coalition to encourage young conservative leaders to mobilize around climate change mitigation initiatives. Nick Guthman is a co-founder and executive director of Blue Future, a youth-led organization focused on connecting young people to progressive campaigns. We also have IFES's youth specialist, Ashley Law, joining us today to facilitate the Q&A section and close out the session. Our panelists and I will be discussing their experiences as young leaders and the strategies, approaches, and recommendations for engaging young people in the electoral process. We look forward to the audience's participation and welcome you to ask questions in the Zoom chat function, which we'll be monitoring throughout the session and addressing following a discussion with our panelists. So let's get started. Welcome Rehana, Danielle, and Nick. To kick off our discussion, I'll start by asking Rehana, what motivated you to become engaged in politics and community issues? And when do you think young people should become engaged in civic and political life?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be speaking with all of you. Like was said in the beginning, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is for you. So what really motivated me to get involved is just seeing the issues that were affecting my local community and my neighbors, and understanding that, all politics is really local. And so there's a lot that you can do at a local level to improve the lives of your neighbors and your community. I started organizing really within the LGBTQ community, and recently have kind of expanded to just focus on my local neighborhood. But I would say it's never too early to get involved. In my hometown of Tacoma Park, Maryland, actually 16-year-olds can vote in local elections, and I think that's fantastic. Just having that way for young folks to make themselves heard, especially at the local level, I think is so critical, because a lot of those decisions that are being made about, school districts and zoning and where the local funding is going really impact youth a lot. So I think it's really great what we've seen happen in the last couple of years of more of that youth organizing bubbling up to the national level. But there's also so much being done at the local level, and it really is impacting folks' lives. So I would say never too early. I remember going to my first protest or demonstration when I was maybe 8 or 9. And it's a memory that really has stuck with me because voting is essential, political involvement is essential, but attending demonstrations and protests and organizing in your community are also impactful and can be just as much a motivator for larger change as voting can.
Thanks, Rehana. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about the sense of identity that comes with connecting with your community and being able to influence change there. So Danielle, I'll turn to you. What motivated you to become engaged in politics and community issues? And given what Rehana just said about, there's never a time that's too early to get involved, is there a time that's maybe more opportune to maybe get involved and increase political participation among youth?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And like Rehana, I actually got involved with politics at a very young age as well. I remember being younger and watching the news and hearing about, whatever the issue of the day was and wanting to do something about it and wanting to help people. And so I got involved very young. I don't necessarily think there's an ideal age to get involved. I think what matters more than age is making sure that you're actually informed, and regardless of your age, as long as you're informed on the issues and you know not only what you stand for, but why you stand for it, then you should have every opportunity to get involved with politics.
Thanks, Danielle. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, and really excited to be here with my colleagues, Rehana and Danielle, and to be with all of you wherever you may be. I got involved when I was 12 years old. There was this guy running for president. His name was Barack Obama. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and my parents are both union organizers. And they asked if I wanted to skip school to go knock on doors for then Senator Barack Obama in 2008. And I asked them, well, do I have to go to school? They said, no, we're going to drive out to Las Vegas and we're going to go knock on some doors. I said, well, what does that mean? But do I have to go to school? And they said, no, you will not go to school. You just have to come with us, and we're going to go do the hard work to make our democracy function. And that was, a formative experience in middle school, which I do think is a really prime opportunity. And a lot of research shows that in those middle school, high school, and college years, providing young people with the opportunity to explore politics, to wrestle with the ideas, to understand the issues and why they stand for them, as Danielle said, and to then find community and use political participation as a way to build friendships, to build relationships and connections with others, is a really, really important thing to do. And ever since then, I've continued to find ways to bring others into the political process. Obviously, as a 12-year-old, I was like one of the youngest people there. But then a few years later, I was 16 or I was 17, and I was looking around. Where are the other young people? Why aren't we getting involved? And in part, that's by design. And we need to, as institutions, as organizations, and as governments, do a lot more to make political participation accessible, equitable, and by doing so, I think we'll have much more enhanced decisions for the populations, the communities, the audiences that we all serve. And so there's never a time that's too young. My parents do joke with me that my brother and I, we were out in the stroller knocking on doors or going to different union halls and meetings and things like that. So when we start young, we can make a career out of it, and we can contribute even more to our community, to our society, and of course, to our whole world.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so one of the key considerations around timing is that the opportunity to affect change can come at any point. So with that in mind, we've seen a recent uptick in youth-led social justice movements in the US that highlight a variety of community and national issues. With that in mind, Nick, how do you think these non-formal methods of advocacy and demonstration impact politics?
It's a really important question to meet this moment. Young people, we must demand that our elected leaders and decision makers in our communities are focusing on the things that matter most to our generation and to most people at least in America. Things like equal justice, good paying jobs, clean air and water, livable communities, quality and equitable healthcare, free college, and so much more. But when those priorities are under attack, when Black folks are being killed by officers of the law, when children are worried about if they can be safe in school and deal with the trauma of hearing gunshots, and when the future of our planet, and if we're able to live here any longer, is more uncertain than ever before, these forms of advocacy, mass movements, protests, and strategic organizing, really create visible opportunities to bring more people into this political process, as we were just saying. And by doing so, we build a base of support. We find people who share our views, who share our interests, and who share a confidence and grit to do something about it. And we all can, and we all should. But with that base of support, through these maybe non-formal methods of advocacy and these more public, visible methods of advocacy, that's how we build social and political power. And when we have some social and political power, when we have a base, when we've raised some money, when we've made relationships and connections with other movements, and when we approach this work in an intersectional manner, that's when we can really hold decision makers, again, at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, in institutions, corporations. We can hold them accountable and enact policies that really improve people's lives, especially for those who have been longest denied equality, longest denied justice and freedom by the powerful few. And so, here in America, we have the privilege to protest. We have the privilege to vote, and we must demand better for our future. And so, I'd love to hear what my colleagues have to say on that front, but it's a really, really exciting time for the youth movement, not only in America, but around the world.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so Danielle, you've been pretty active in the climate change advocacy community. So can you talk a little bit about how you've engaged other young people and your peers around non-formal methods of advocacy to impact politics around climate change?
Certainly. Well, first of all, I want to say that I think the demonstrations, the protests, the marches, they're all essential to our democracy. And what my organization has done is taken it a step further, because as important as those methods are, the biggest function of them is sending a message and showing strength in numbers, but you have to follow up with action. And so we like to go beyond the work that is, fun and engaging and maybe sexy, and, have those meetings that are going to advance the policy that's going to impact the issues we actually care about. So at my organization, the American Conservation Coalition, we definitely engage in tactics that are going to get attention and start a conversation, but then we're also going to go to Capitol Hill and have a meeting with somebody and say, hey, this is why we did this. Can you do something about it? Can we work together on this? Let's have that conversation and move forward.
Yeah, so over to you, Rehana, to discuss some of the non-formal methods of advocacy that you've engaged in the DC community.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's already been said. These non-formal methods, as you called them, are some of the most important methods in my mind to spread awareness, gather community, and make the message heard to a broader audience. I think one of the really cool things that I've seen happen in DC and with other youth-led movements in the US is really treating those protests not just as a demonstration about a particular issue, but as a community event. So we've seen some of the Black Lives Matter protests in DC have midnight yoga for protesters. They, some of the marches and demonstrations, they serve food to the community and have food available for folks that are experiencing hardship due to COVID-19. There's also been a lot of partnerships with local mutual aid efforts, and a lot of organizing around making sure that we as a community can provide for each other and get our needs met by the community, and that people are safe and taken care of, and that we're paying attention to the work that needs to be done through policy, of course, but also acknowledging what we can do right now ourselves to help our neighbors and communities. So that's been really, really awesome. And one of the other pieces that I'm involved in is I'm chair of the board of directors of the DC Center for the LGBTQ community. And the DC Center has been involved by also providing a space, both physically and now in COVID times, virtually, for the LGBTQ community in DC to really to gather and coordinate and advocate together. So I think it's also about creating those intersectional partnerships and reaching across movements to understand that all of these issues are tied together, and we'll be stronger together if we can form coalitions that jointly advocate for things. So those partnerships have also been really critical at the local level, and I think at the national and international level as well.
Thanks, Rehana. That's a great segue to my next question. So given what you've said, are there any specific strategies to engage young people that seem to have more impact than others, especially among marginalized groups such as the LGBT community or young persons with disabilities or young women?
I think it's all about, from my perspective, I think it's all about choice. Providing different methods for different folks to get involved in whatever way that they're most comfortable, right? And I think it's about each one of us, anyone who wants to get engaged, thinking about what do you bring to the table that's going to help this movement? Are you willing to be out in the streets protesting for 10 hours or every day for months? Because that's what a lot of folks have been doing across the US. And in DC, there have been protests every single night for the last several months. Are you really good at social media? Are you, is what you bring to the table being able to amplify that message? Do you have an online audience? Or do you have connections, political connections, where you can really leverage those to carry that message from the streets into the political space? I think it's really giving folks different ways to further the movement and get involved, excuse me, that allow them to really show and bring their strengths and skills to contribute to the movement at large. That is really important. So I think choice is what I would recommend to anyone who's leading a movement or looking to add folks to their movement.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Danielle, we know that climate change can disproportionately impact marginalized groups and young people specifically. So what are some of the strategies that you and the ACC have done to mobilize young people, and especially young people with marginalized identities, to engage around climate change?
Yeah, first of all, so I agree completely with Rehana. You have to know what you bring to the table. And similarly, we need to know what our activists are comfortable with, what they want to do. And so, especially in the age of COVID, we've looked at moving as much of our activism online as we can. So what that looks like could be participating in social media campaigns. It could be holding virtual meetings with people, attending virtual town halls or debates, things like that. We've also done a bunch of call to actions. So getting people directly in touch with their legislators where they can say, I know this is like the age of COVID, we can't get together, but I still really care about this. I know you're dealing with all these other things, but climate change is not going away. It's still important. And basically just keeping the pressure on and showing that this issue matters to young people. Environmental justice matters to young people, and we need to be acting on it.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, it seems like digital engagement has become a really, really important element of youth participation, especially in the COVID-19 era and this year in general with the US elections on the horizon. Nick, how have you been working with college students and engaging them in the political process, and maybe thinking about digital engagement on your end as well?
Yeah, definitely agree with what's been said, and providing folks with the choices and the opportunity to figure out how they want to contribute, and to help train them to develop their confidence and their leadership potential that may not always be used for the movements that we're a part of, but by providing people with trainings and skills that they can take with them wherever they go, and hopefully provide them with a positive experience with our organizations, with political advocacy and participation, they will want to stay in this work because it's so purpose driven, because it pulls at our heartstrings and it gets people engaged in that way. And so at Blue Future, we've had a lot of success of doing kind of taking a three-pronged approach as a strategy, not just to meet this moment with COVID and the digital world that we have to live in, but for that longer term thinking. And what I mean by that is, impactful strategies for engaging young people this time, I think, have to infuse both the electoral work and legislative advocacy, and building that community, and of course, building the skills, so that young people are not just contributing to immediate wins and efforts towards policy changes in the short term, but so that our generation is equipped and prepared to sustain a more long-term pipeline of leadership development and public service, so that as we grow up a little bit and as we take on different roles in our communities, we can address the many challenges we face in America and around the world. And so by taking this three-pronged approach, incorporating electoral work, incorporating issue advocacy, where people can share their stories and talk to legislators, talk to business leaders and other leaders in the community, and then mixing that all together with leadership development, hard skills, time management skills, public speaking skills, relationship building, and organizational development skills. I think by doing that, we can have the communities, again, longest denied access by the powerful few, they'll have a seat at the table. And by having a seat at the table, governments and organizations will benefit from the brilliance that young people have to offer, that young people with diverse backgrounds and different experiences can help inform these better decisions, so that we have better outcomes and improve people's lives. And the last thing I'll say in terms of a digital strategy, social media has always been important to political participation since its existence, but especially now we've seen such a shift, especially around the Black Lives Matter movement, of it becoming more popularized and almost becoming cool in many ways. And that's a huge, huge shift from when I was just getting started. As I said, I was one of the only young people around who was caring about many of the issues that we were talking about in our community. And so we need to organize those people online. Everyone who's sharing posts about Black Lives Matter, everyone who's sharing posts about the Supreme Court or sharing posts about voting rates or what have you. We need to talk to them. We need to figure out ways to reach them and speak to them in their language and come up with content, memes, videos, TikToks, Reels, all the rest, to engage with those folks, and then bring them in. So they may have just shared a post or they may have just tweeted something with a hashtag, but how do we actually pull them into our organizations and organize them to really move in a strategic direction to win the improvements that we all do care about, clearly, because we've been talking about it online.
Yeah, it seems like all three of you have really doubled down on this idea that you need to tailor strategies to the communities that you're reaching out to, which I think is a really important lesson for our audience to take away. It's also clear that informal political participation is common among young people and growing in light of social media. But the other side of the coin is formal participation, especially voting. We saw that in 2018, there was an incredible surge of young people registering to vote. And this year, we're already seeing record-breaking early voting turnout among young people in several key states. So Nick and Danielle, what are your predictions for youth voter turnout for this election? Danielle, over to you first.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Traditionally, young people have not voted in high numbers, and I think that's because they've largely found candidates to be uninspiring and the mainstream parties to not fully represent them. I know I certainly don't feel fully represented by a political party. I think that now young people are very motivated by issues of justice and equality, and I think that that's going to get them to the polls this year.
Great. Nick?
Yeah, so I definitely agree. Our two-party system needs some work. And at the same time, this election year, as you mentioned at the top of the hour, there's a lot of good research showing that the early vote returns are higher than ever before for young people in a majority of battleground states, at least. You know, our generation has the most at stake, and we're going to be dealing with the consequences for years and years to come. So I'm really hopeful that young people will continue to exceed expectations as we did in 2018, and come together as voters, no matter our race, our gender, our sexual orientation, our accent, or what have you, and make our voices heard. But you know, at the same time, there are a lot of hurdles, and we need to think about ways to make voting more accessible, especially for new voters, first-time voters, young voters, because it's not as easy as it should be to fulfill our civic duty and be active participants here in our democracy.
Yeah, as a young voter myself, I am certainly hopeful that my peers will turn out in record-breaking numbers and really show that the voting bloc has shifted. Um, Nick, you touched a little bit on some of the challenges that are facing young people as they engage in the elections. What might some of these challenges be, and what opportunities exist for engaging young people in the formal electoral process? And how might we curb some of these challenges to further encourage participation?
Well, y'all are the experts, so I hope I don't say anything that goes against, you know, the very important and critical work that you all do at IFES and with the U.S. elections program. But one thing that I think is important to call out is while we were proud of, I think around 40% of young Americans, Gen Z and millennials voting in 2018, 40% is not great. I think we could do a lot better. So how do we do that? Well, first, the responsibility to register to vote in the United States falls almost entirely on the individual, right? On each of us, one person at a time. Now, of course, there are many organizations that do really impactful work to get out people registered to vote. But we should ask, why is that? Why is it on us to register to vote? And who designed that system? And could we improve it? What could we do to ease the burden of responsibility so that everyone has the chance to vote? It should not be a radical idea to say that we're going to have automatic voter registration when people turn 18, they are registered voters. That should not be a radical idea. It shouldn't be radical to say that in America, we celebrate our right to vote by making Election Day a national holiday so that young people who often are in school or working part-time jobs or studying or what have you, can have the right to vote, as well as all people, workers, and again, those longest denied. And so I hope that within the next several years, young people will push for these sorts of improvements that enhance our democracy and make it more inclusive, and live up to the promise of a government of, by, and for the people. But we have a lot of work still to go because, as I said, 40% in 2018 was great. Hopefully we see a greater surge this year. But voting and voter participation should be 100%. And we can't do that. It's not impossible. There are other models, and again, y'all are the experts, but there are other models around the world where the voter participation rate is so high. It should be a no-brainer, and I think that's one of the key areas that young people are focused on and will focus on as we move forward.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, some of the challenges that we've seen in the US and abroad have been around the COVID-19 pandemic and how that's shifted political participation amongst all citizens, but especially youth, and also the idea of increased use of social media and what that means for disinformation and having access to information that is accurate and timely. Rehana, in your experience, how have these challenges impacted young people in your community and around the electoral process?
Yeah, so I think as much as social media is a critical tool for organizing, you're right, absolutely, that misinformation and disinformation is really common and becoming more common every day. And so I think that as we were just talking about like engaging folks and leveraging their skills and training them in order to enhance those skills and participate more actively, something that goes along with that is training folks in digital literacy. how to spot misinformation and disinformation, and how to be able to discern that and identify a trusted source. I think that part of what's been helping combat that is local organizing, where you can know who are the leaders in your community because you've met them or seen them. You know that they're real people, and get your information kind of from the source. But one of the other things I would say about organizing tools is, it's really critical that we totally agree, remove those roadblocks for voting, but also that we stress the importance of voting. I think that, one of the things that really has motivated young people to vote more is seeing just how much can change, regardless of your political party or political ideology. We've seen over the last 6 years, just how much can really be affected by elections and how much can change in a short period of time. So I think that seeing those and feeling those consequences is also motivating folks to vote, because whether you agree or disagree with what's been happening the last few years, you've seen that, change can really happen. So I think that that's motivating people to show up and show out more at the polls. I really hope that the numbers are higher than 40% this year. I totally agree. But being able to take where people are, meet them where they are, and then tell them what their next steps are in a really specific and engaging way is really essential to converting that online engagement into formal engagement in the political process.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Rehana. Danielle, you previously mentioned some disillusionment with government, with political parties amongst the young people that you've worked with. So what are your ideas about this challenge and how to kind of overcome that challenge and get people, young people to see that their engagement formally is just as important?
Yeah, so I think I offer a little bit of a different perspective here. I think voting is certainly not easy. And I hear what Andrew is saying when he says that, it shouldn't be a responsibility that's solely on us. But at the same time, voting is a responsibility. It is your civic duty to be informed and to go to the polls and make a decision. And we have to participate in that process to make the process better. And I hope that's a message that young people can take away, because we are doing incredible things. We're organizing in the streets, in our communities, online, and we have so many amazing resources that we can pull from in this day and age. So, if we can go out and organize these massive protests or, give speeches like Greta Thunberg, who's inspired millions, then we should certainly be able to bring ourselves to the polls and be educated about what it is we're voting for.
Yeah, certainly. That's a really important thing to keep in mind, because young people need to understand the importance of their vote and how their informal advocacy then translates into taking action and moving forward. Nick, you have worked on a lot of college campuses, and so I wonder, what have Get Out the Vote campaigns looked like, and given the challenges from COVID-19, how have that moved on to the digital sphere?
It's an extremely challenging environment to be both a student and an organizer right now. Very, very difficult circumstances as schools are adapting and on campus, off campus, housing, no housing, Zoom school, tedious tasks to ensure learning that take people's time away from the important work of getting out the vote. So it has shifted quite a bit. I mean, whereas in the past, our organization was always really excited to work with students on college and high school campuses to, for example, pay for pizza at a voter registration booth, or pay for pizza at a phone bank that was being held after class, or something like that. And as many of us know, if there's food at the event, turnout increases probably 3 to 4 times, especially true for college students and high school students. And so whereas in the past, that was an incredibly effective tactic, it may not have been the sexiest thing to pitch to a donor, but we said, we need money for pizza. And if there's pizza, people will make calls. And if people make calls, people will turn out to vote. We can't really do that anymore because people are not meeting on campus to have a phone bank. People are not going out to knock on doors as much. In some places, they're doing it safely. In some places, folks are able to come together that way. But it's taken a real shift in COVID. And while we still strongly believe in providing people with stipends, of course, to make this work accessible, providing people with incentives, and ways to come together and build community by having dinners or meals together, even if it is on Zoom. We might Venmo people $10 to go order some pizza, and then we'll come together and make calls online. But so those tactics have changed, but the principles have stayed the same. But the biggest difference, I think, that COVID has presented, of course, beyond just being in a digital space, is the impact of relational organizing. And since we cannot reach as many folks as we would like to, as campaigns would like to, as young people would like to, it's, again, the responsibility then falls to us to go through our contact lists on Instagram and everyone who follows us and DM them to see if they have a plan to vote, or to go through Facebook and Facebook message people through Facebook Messenger, although frankly, not too many of us are using Facebook anymore. I think there's a big opportunity also to figure out how to incorporate new forms of social media like TikTok to do some of this relational organizing. But overall, the principles stay the same in terms of firing people up, meeting people where they are, providing people with the choices to get involved in different ways. Maybe it's graphic design, to come up with a nice graphic that everyone will share around with information about how to vote at their college campus, or what to do if you live in, if you don't live on campus, but you want to vote in that state, and infographics like that. Or maybe it's making videos and going live and engaging with folks directly that way. But ultimately, the principles stay the same, and it's been an interesting time, a challenging time, but also we've seen this unleashing of creativity of how to reach people through relational organizing, through digital and social media. And I think it's through those innovations that we will actually see turnout increase, I sure hope, but also leave us in a better place moving forward as we have to continue this important work and move beyond voting. Voting is the first step. And it's, we have to recognize that as well and incorporate these innovative, creative, cultural strategies to reach people where they are and talk to as many people, bring them into the process.
Yeah, Get Out the Vote campaigns have especially been important in moving on to the digital sphere in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in tandem to that, we've also seen campaigns to get young people to work as poll workers for this election, in light of the fact that COVID-19 is a much more of a risk for the usual demographic that works as poll workers. And so I think it's also really important to keep in mind that young people can be engaged in that way as well and learn a lot about the electoral process through working in polling stations on election day and during early voting. And we've seen that this is quickly approaching record-breaking numbers among young people, especially young women who are working as poll workers in this election. So that's something else that's really getting young people fired up as well. Danielle and Rehana, is there anything else that you want to add about these challenges and opportunities for young people to engage on election day?
Yeah. So I would just add that another challenge with voting that we haven't really talked about yet is voter suppression. And without going into the partisan sphere, we're seeing really long lines at polling stations, at polling locations rather. And one of the things that's really happening in COVID times is I think state and local governments are trying to decide how many polling locations can we safely staff, and how do we adjust our procedures to safely accommodate voters during the global pandemic without risking everyone's health. But that's leading to longer lines, and fewer polling locations. So one of the cool things that we've seen in the US happening with that is organizations, whether they be formal or informal, restaurants, businesses, turning out to provide services to folks who are in line to vote. Everything from food to water, to I saw a marching band come and perform for folks who were standing in line to really motivate them to stay in line and finish voting, passing out umbrellas if it's raining. There's a lot of different organizing happening around making sure that folks that have a lot of barriers to voting are able to get over those hurdles and actually make it to the polls and cast their vote, because I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the intentional or unintentional hurdles that are being put in people's paths this year in particular when they are attempting to vote. So that's been really interesting from my vantage point to see and to get involved in, because I think it's another example of where organizing is more successful when you think about it from a community perspective. And not only how can I encourage my community to vote, but how can I support them as they are attempting to vote and make sure that when they decide, yes, I want to vote, that they have the tools and resources to actually do it, which is not always as easy as it might seem or as it should be.
Yeah, thanks, Rehana. It certainly is something that we've seen already in early voting locations, long voting lines. So definitely something to keep in mind. Danielle, anything to add before we take some questions from the audience?
Excuse me. I think Nick and Rehana hit the nail on the head with their answers, so I don't have too much to add. I guess the only thing I would say is that I really hope young people make their voices heard in November despite these challenges in front of them, because this is a really important election.
Thanks, Danielle. It certainly is. So let's see. We have a week left, and then we'll have some idea about how young people have turned out on election day. So thank you all. These insights have been really, really helpful, and I'm sure our audience has a number of burning questions. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ashley to pick some of these questions and pose them to our panelists to discuss. Ashley?
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. Nick, Rehana, Danielle, wow, you all have shared some amazing stories, some that I can actually relate to as well. Going into the voting booth with my father when I was 6 or 7 years old for the first time, and thinking about how that impacted, my path in life. I think you all have shared some incredible strategies as well related to bolstering youth participation, not only in political life, but as well as civic life. And it's all very well connected. So appreciate you all sharing these great points. As Andrew mentioned, we've definitely received some great questions. To be honest, I'm having a little bit of a tough time thinking about which one we might want to jump off with because of all these great points. But Rehana, you just mentioned voter suppression, and earlier you mentioned Tacoma Park, Maryland, allowing 16-year-olds to vote. And so maybe we'll start with this question from our audience. Are any of you aware of other movements, either in cities, counties, or states, around lowering the voting age? And what's your take on voter suppression related to voting age? And I'll just open the floor up to anyone who'd like to respond.
Yeah, so I can start off. Yes, absolutely. I think there are, other jurisdictions nearby in the DC area that are thinking about lowering the voting age to 16, at least for local elections. And I know that especially in, races for Board of Education and in policy areas like education that directly and immediately impact youth, there is a lot of organizing going on to try and make sure that youth voices are more represented at the table. Lots of school boards have a student representative to the school board that can be elected by other students and has a seat at the table in those education conversations. I think that's a great model that we've seen. I know that my county that I grew up in, Montgomery County, Maryland, had a student rep on the Board of Education. And so I think those are excellent models, but I would also love to see it at the national level. I think that we've seen such amazing youth leaders in these movements that are 16 and younger, that we know that 16-year-olds are perfectly able to be informed about these issues and vote intelligently and responsibly. So I would really love to see more of that conversation at a national level, but I've definitely seen it in many local jurisdictions around the DC area.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in as well and second everything Rehana said. It is exciting to see movement at the local level, and because that's where it starts. And that's one of the beautiful things about our democracy, is that each state, each city is a laboratory to explore different ideas and to test different things out. And I think that within all of our lifetimes, we may see the voting age lowered to 16. 16-year-olds pay taxes, they drive cars, and they're leading social movements, as we've seen. And the information that they have access to is brilliant in this day and age, on social media, of course, on the internet and all the rest. And we should ask the question, and we should be pushing for a democracy that's more accessible when young people are going to be facing the consequences of the decisions that these folks make for years and years to come. They should have a seat at the table. They're not the only ones. We're not saying only 16-year-olds vote. We're saying they should join us, just like the older folks do, and be able to participate in that decision-making process. And I would also second the school advisory boards. I think every member of Congress should have a youth advisory council in every congressional district around the country, to be in touch and be in tune with the needs and the concerns and the anxieties and the hopes and the dreams of our generation. And by doing so, again, we would make better decisions, not just for young people, for all people. And so I'm excited by the potential and possibility of expanding our democracy and making it more accessible to young people, because when the young people are able to participate, that's when we see improvements for all of us.
Yeah, great. Rehana and Nick, you're sharing some excellent points as it relates to, lowering the voting age to 16. Danielle, I wonder, do you have anything to chime in as well on this topic?
I love the idea of youth advisory boards that Nick was talking about. I think that's really important. I do have my reservations about lowering the voting age to 16, and that's simply because I know I don't believe everything that I believed when I was 16, and I also know that I was missing a lot of context when I was 16. And that's not to undermine young people by any means. It's just to say I have my reservations with it. I do think overall we need to decide at what age it is that we begin trusting young people, because you can join the military at 16, you can vote at 18, you can smoke and drink at 21. And it's just very inconsistent. And I think it would send a better message if we could decide when we finally trust young people to make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, Danielle, that's a great point. At what point or what age will we start trusting young people? And I think this relates to another question we've gotten from the audience. Rehana, Nick, you spoke about some of the ways that we can bring young people to the formal table at the community and school level, but how do we bridge that gap between young people and elected leaders at the national level? And you all spoke about relationship building, and I think it's important for young people to build those relationships with elected leaders, but also with these national political processes. And so what tactics or strategies do you have to suggest for young leaders around the world to build that relationship at the national level and be able to sort of contribute at that formal decision-making table?
So I think,
I'd be happy to, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Nick. Okay, the beauty of virtual events we're seeing here. So I would say one of my tips, which may sound obvious, but I think is really important, is demand it. Elected officials work for us. They are representatives of the electorate, and it's really important that youth organizers and all organizers recognize that and demand to be heard by our elected officials. I think that calling, emailing, showing up at folks' offices, we've seen that be really effective, and just showing up at offices and asking for a meeting. But I really think that in approaching elected officials, stressing that you are constituents. And one of the things that I've seen as well with national organizing is trying to identify the different districts where you do have membership, so that you can have and tap those members to reach out to those particular officials, because at least in the US, you're much likely to get time and attention from elected officials if you are one of their constituents, and you can say, I represent X number of folks that live in your district, and that's why I need a meeting. But I also think that being involved in those formal political processes is critical as well. And so, running for office, interning at your representative's office, or looking for opportunities to do their social media as well, or there's a lot of opportunities to engage in that way, and that is not accessible to everyone. Definitely want to acknowledge the privilege that it takes to access those formal avenues, but again, looking for the benefits and the skills that you bring to the table, and the set of privileges that you bring to the table, and how can you bring the rest of the movement along with you to help them access that power?
Yeah, that's a great point, Rehana. Thinking about the privilege that some folks do have, and thinking about how we lift up, marginalized groups to participate at that same level. Nick, Danielle, did you want to weigh in as well?
Yeah, I would just say, in addition to what Rehana was saying, bring a friend along, right? Because you can make a difference having your voice heard, but it's going to double if you have somebody come with you, and if they have someone come with them. And if you can show that there's a movement and a base for what it is you're advocating for, you're so much more likely to get what you're asking for. And I think it's really important to show that as constituents, this is what we care about, and you have a responsibility as an elected official to respond to that.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I would say demand it, and if you don't get it, organize power to get it. And so let's just take the concept of a youth advisory council, which, by the way, many congressional representatives, and I'm sure at the state and local level, do have versions of this. It's not a radical concept. But if I was to approach my member of Congress and I say, you know what, I think we should have a youth advisory council, not just for one meeting or one issue, right, but for a formal structure and a process by which not just like me or my friends or my generation can approach, right, this decision maker, but so that for the future there's an avenue to communicate, to make it, your voice is heard in a strategic way. And if my member of Congress told me no chance, I'd build it anyways, right? They may not listen, but then we'd get some press on it, right? And we would say, we formed a youth advisory council of people all across the district, different backgrounds, different genders, different political ideologies, and we're gonna meet once a month, and we're gonna hold a seat there at the meeting with a cardboard cutout of our member of Congress. And if they don't want to show up, okay, that's fine. But we're going to talk about the issues that matter to us. And so that's just one example. But you could think about, if we need funding for Wi-Fi, because right now students are struggling at home to access Wi-Fi as they learn in a remote environment. Well, we might go call the school board and ask for one meeting, and they may say, oh, the funding's not there. You say, well, where's the funding then? I need to learn, right? And it doesn't always have to be this kind of tactical or pressure campaign. And it shouldn't necessarily be the first step. I think we should try as hard as we can to work in partnership and in community and in coalition with other organizations and with our decision makers. But sometimes it has to be to get what we deserve, to get what we are fighting for. And again, it's very rarely a selfish endeavor that we're pursuing as young people. We're asking for things, we're demanding things, we're organizing for things that protect our future and that make it more equitable and more accessible. And so, as they say, if they're not going to give you a seat at the table, let's bring a folding chair. And if they're not going to give us a youth advisory board, let's build it ourselves and make a big press deal out of it. So it's those sort of creative tactics that I think it's the brilliance of young people, our creativity and our community, and then incorporating newer strategies on social media and the rest that makes me so excited about this work, and why I think it's so important that institutions, organizations, and governments do find ways to provide opportunities for people to think about this. Imagine if all young people were thinking about these sorts of things and had the ability to participate and come up with their best strategy for forming a youth advisory board or for finding funding for Wi-Fi or whatever your issue is. But unfortunately, that's not the case. It is a privilege to do this work. And I do hope we can get better about that.
Yeah, no, Nick, I appreciate what you're saying. If there's a roadblock and someone says no, go do it yourself. Absolutely. And I appreciate all of your comments with this Q&A session and throughout this entire event. I am sorry to say that we've run out of time, but what an amazing discussion we've had. And I just want to wrap with this one point that I think is really important to reiterate. Age isn't necessarily a factor when it comes to engaging in democratic processes, right? We've seen participation happens in a variety of ways. It can occur at any age. And I think, that's something to remember when we think about young people participating in the US elections and democratic processes broadly. When they speak up, take action, it's a strong political force individually, but also collectively. And, we have yet to see if this will pan out in terms of the elections in a few days, but it's an exciting time. This is a fantastic conversation. And, Rehana, you said earlier, it's never too early for young people to participate. And Nick and Danielle, you made the great points about, middle school and high school years are a pivotal time to observe, to learn, to participate before you can formally participate as a voter. So I just want to thank all of you for your thoughts and for sharing your experiences and bringing up some really good points around this topic. And Andrew for moderating, as well as our team behind the scenes supporting event logistics. And just a quick call for the rest of the U.S. elections program. This was our first kickoff panel event, which was fantastic. And we hope to see you over the next couple of weeks as we continue our program. Given the high interest in the youth participation in U.S. elections, we are going to hold a second panel Thursday, October 29th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll have a different group of young speakers and stakeholders from the U.S. and the Pacific Islands. So be sure to tune in for that. And also tomorrow, we have another USEP event at 8 a.m. Eastern on COVID impacts on voting and election administration. So we do hope you'll engage with us over the next few weeks. Be sure to check out our website, www.usep.ifes.org, and RSVP for the events and engage with our various activities on the platform. And finally, before we close, we'd like to remind our audience that IFES is a 501c3 organization funded in part by the U.S. government with a bipartisan board of directors and a nonpartisan organizational identity. We provide apolitical democracy and elections assistance. This work is made possible by the generous support of the American people through the United States Agency for International Development and other supporters. The content associated with this event does not necessarily reflect the views of USAID or our sponsors, nor do the opinions expressed reflect the views or opinions of IFES. Thank you so much again to all of our panelists, Andrew, and the audience members for joining us today for this lively discussion. To continue it, please follow us, IFES Youth, on Twitter, and see you online at the virtual events coming up. Thank you.